Hello, our names are
Hayden.
and Jade. We chose to present our project on the Haida Gwaii tribe and artist Bo Reed. We are really excited to share all that we have learned throughout this past week.
But before we carry on, we'd first like to acknowledge that our school, where we work, play, and learn, is on the shared, unceded traditional territory of the Katzie, Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish people.
Haida Gwaii is a large and small group of islands 100 kilometers west of the northern coast of British Columbia. The Haida Gwaii is one of the most isolated islands in Canada. Formerly the Queen Charlotte Islands, Haida Gwaii involves 200 other islands. The traditional territory contains parts of southern Alaska,
the archipelago 250 kilometers long of Haida Gwaii and separated by 48 to 140 kilometers of open water. Before settlers came and colonization occurred, there were tens of thousands of natives in several dozen towns throughout this island. After contact, the population fell to 600 people, due to the disease the British brought, including measles, typhoid, and smallpox. This is the most dramatic drop for any tribe recorded in the province. Currently, the Haida people make up 50% of 5,000 people living on the island.
The Haida people live throughout the islands, but there are two main communities: Gala Massa at the northern end of the Grand Island and the Gada at the south end of the island. There are other Haida people all around the world. Vancouver, 770 kilometers south of Haida Gwaii, has a larger population, as does King Prince Rupert, which is 100 kilometers east across Hectic Strait.
Languages. The Haida people's languages are the Ga Plagi Zadkil and Helga Gilda Zadakil. The name of the island Haida Gwaii means Islands of the People. Before the contact with settlers hundreds of years ago, all Haida were fluent with the two main Haida languages. But currently, these languages are highly endangered. Today, the amount of Haida speakers is down to no more than 3 or 4 dozen people. Unfortunately, most of these speakers are over the age of 70. This is a huge problem because in order for languages to survive, they have to be taught to younger generations, which in this case is difficult.
Social organization. The Haida Nation was split into two lines, Eagle and Raven. Every member from one of these clans were related and had their own site, but in modern day, Haida people are a mixture of Raven and Eagle.
There was no main chief, but there were many households holding up to 10 large families. Each household was controlled by a male chief. This chief would also be in charge of slaves held in the building, controlling up to 100 people. Chiefs inherited their power through the matrilineal line. The chief's oldest sister's son was the heir to every household.
To celebrate a new chief or demonstrate power, potlatches were held. The Haidas would work for years gathering a mountain of food and gifts necessary for potlatch. Only chiefs and people of high power could host potlatches. Anyone who did not have a potlatch hosted in their honor was simply a commoner. These traditions have not changed since Haida Gwaii was colonized.
Living conditions. These islands are involved in the Pacific Ocean weather system, so therefore they endure one of the strongest winds in Canada. The waves can rise up to 35 meters along with 4 meters of rain per year. Since the islands are filled with rich waters of the North Pacific, the temperature varies from warm offshore currents.
The role of women throughout the communities were to gather plants and herbs, wool baskets and cloth. The women did most of the cooking and caretaking of the kids in the family. The men, on the other hand, were hunters and fishermen. Rarely they went to war to fight for their family. Both women and men played the role of storytelling and creating artwork or music. They also took part in use of traditional medicine. The role of the Haida chief was always played as the man, but the women played major roles as clan leaders.
Throughout the island, there are vast amounts of bird nesting colonies, including various numbers of raptors. There are also countless salmon spawning streams, big and small. Before settlers came, the Haida natives lived off the produce from the Pacific Ocean.
They built their rectangular wood plank houses and dug out canoes from cedar trees on their island. Usually the houses were up to 100 feet long. Each house was filled with multiple families, up to 50 people per house from the same clan. After the contact with settlers, currently Haida people live in apartment buildings or modern housing and only use old-fashioned buildings that are made from wood plank cedar for ceremonial purposes.
Ceremonies and spiritual beliefs. Potlatches were essentially the only ceremony that the Haida used, but many would be held for different reasons. The potlatch was an opportunity for families to give and receive beautiful gifts, ranging from various foods to amazing jewelry, cutlery, and trinkets. Traditional dances would take place, with traditional songs accompanying.
The central and northern coast shared similar spiritual beliefs, most relating to the devious, greedy raven and the many conflicts he gets himself into. These stories might just be about a raven getting into trouble, but the messages inside taught Haida people how to behave and live in their nation.
Haida stationed totem poles outside of longhouses to represent power and lineage within a family. The eagle and raven lineages were set to use different animals for their totems. The raven clan mainly used land mammals as well as the killer whale, a powerful animal in Haida culture, while the eagle clan stuck to different types of fish.
Haida tribe were the people of the sea. They are skilled fishers and hunters. The Haida people decorate their faces and their bodies with different types of tattoos. Some of the traditions for women were to pierce their lower lip so they could wear a plug as an ornament.
These ceremonies have not changed, just lessened in size and length. The spiritual beliefs of the raven and other mythical beings have not been lost, as long as the storytellers of the nation do their job to keep the oral history.
Oral history. The significant Haida stories tell the first people who emerged from the giant clamshell on the beach of Rosepit, and from the help of the raven they were able to escape. The story is called The Raven and the First Men. The raven is the most powerful creature of the myth time. Stories tell how Raven was walking on the beach alone, and then he heard a sound coming from the clamshell. He looked in the shell and saw many little human creatures. They were all terrified of the raven and the great, huge outside world. So the raven leaned his head to the shell and decided to use his trickster tongue that had gotten him into trouble before. He then convinced and coaxed the humans to come outside the shell and play in a shiny new world. The main lesson of the story is how the Haida people came to be this huge world with the help from the Great Raven. These stories have remained relatively the same before and after settlers came to Haida, but with all the verbal stories passed down to each new generation of the story is changed with a few words or so. But the meaning of the story stays the same.
This is the story of how the raven stole the sun, moon, and stars. Long ago, Great Eagle was the guardian of the elements: fire, water, the moon, sun, and stars. The Great Eagle was a very greedy and mean animal, and he kept these things safe inside of his longhouse. Great Eagle also had a very beautiful daughter, whom the raven discovered and fell in love with. Before this event, Raven was an amazing white bird, and it was easy for him to catch the daughter's attention. Eventually, the raven was invited to Great Eagle's longhouse by his daughter.
As Raven approached, he immediately saw the objects on the earth hung on the sides of the building. Raven decided to steal back these items was the right thing to do. He stole them when no one was looking, and darted towards the fireplace and through the chimney, showering himself in soot, forever coloring the raven a sinister black. As soon as he reached the sky, he hung the sun way up to the sky, providing light to the ends of the earth. So much light, in fact, that he was able to travel to the middle of the ocean. Once the sun set, he hung up the moon and the stars, giving him more light to take the water and fire along with him wherever he flew to next.
I think this story is meaningful because it may just seem like more mischief that the raven got into, but really it teaches us and the Haida people to be grateful for the elements and the light provided by the raven. It teaches not to take simple things for granted.
Contemporary artist, activist / Bill Reid. Bill Reid Jr. was born in Victoria, BC and raised by his German-Scottish father and his mother, whose family lived in the Raven/Wolf clan of Tanu and otherwise known as the Haida. At a young age, Bill had already taken an interest in Haida's art. Therefore, Reid's grandfather taught him more about the culture and was given his great-uncle's tools to create art.
Bill kept an interest in Haida's art while working at CBC Radio in Toronto. He studied European goldsmithing at the Ryerson Institute of Technology.
At age 31, he made his choice to move all the way to Vancouver, finding a studio at the Granville Island. Therefore, he studied his great-uncle's work, understanding the symbolism, and gradually began creating his own work in forms such as jewelry and carving.
Impact and intent. Bill Reid's overall intent was to bring life and awareness to Haida's culture through masterful art pieces, as well as protests against deforestation and destruction of wildlife on the island of Haida. He succeeded enormously, with different carvings of his showcased around British Columbia and even across the country.
His art piece, Raven and the First Men, is an original piece by Reid illustrating an old Haida story of how their first ancestors came to the island.
The raven was wandering along Rosebud Beach along the coast of Haida when it came across a clamshell. This clamshell had little creatures poking out of it, seemingly too afraid to leave the shell. The raven convinced them to live on his land, and they became the first Haida.
Bill worked on the piece for 2 years with different artists and ideas. Eventually finishing the carving on April 1st, 1980, it was commissioned piece for British Columbia's Museum of Anthropology, and the carving sits in the center of its own room, for people to learn and view.
This isn't necessarily a controversial piece, but an essential piece in the understanding of Haida culture and history. Bill had no public artwork close to controversial, sticking to indigenous style and form.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed learning about our presentation just as much as we did. Haida Gwaii is a home of many amazing artists and communities.